get started, this is an official meeting of the Livingston Parish Council, today being January the 12th, 6 o'clock p.m., 2017. All public notices have been sent out, and a quorum has been established. Let's confirm that with a roll call first by Ms. Sandy to make sure we have a quorum.
Miss Angie's.
I'm sorry, okay. Miss Angie Cornett, would you call the roll, please,
Yes,
to make
Miss-
sure we have a quorum?
Mr. Ard.
Here.
Mr. Wascom.
Here.
Mr. Girlinghouse.
Here.
Mr. King.
Here.
Mr. Harris.
Here.
Mr. Talbert.
Here.
Mr. Lobel.
Here.
Mr. Averitt.
Here.
Mr. Mack.
Here.
All 9 members of the Livingston Parish Council are present, and this starts the Parish Council meeting. To get started, can we all stand up? And I'd like to ask, turn it over to, first let's do a prayer with Mr., I think, Parish President Leighton Riggs. Would you lead us in a prayer, please?
Sure. Bow your heads, please. Dear Heavenly Father, first of all, we thank you for this day, Lord. We thank you for the privilege and the right, Lord, for being able to work together, to meet together like this. We ask, Lord, that you bless us and be with us as we make decisions, and that every decision we make, we look to you for guidance, and that we follow that guidance, that we work closely with one another for the betterment of Livingston Parish. We ask, Lord, that you watch over us each and every day, protect us, guide and direct us, for us in your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
As you remain standing, Mr. Tab Lobel has someone to do the Pledge of Allegiance, and so I'd like for him to introduce him now.
Russell Legnew, a young man from Springfield, has to come to a meeting like this to get his communication badge. So I thought it might be a neat opportunity for him to lead us in the pledge tonight. So Russell, if you would.
Will you please join me in the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Russell.
Thank you, sir. What's your name, young man?
Russell Legman,
And what school do you go to?
Springfield.
Springfield?
Yes, sir.
And what grade are you in?
8.
8th grade. And you're going for your Eagle Scout?
Yes, sir.
Congratulations.
Very good.
man. That's such an honor. Such an honor. Thank you so much. And I know you'll make Livingston Parish proud. Matter of fact, some of the past presidents and astronauts were all Eagle Scouts, so looking for great things. First item on the agenda is item 5. It has been the custom of the Livingston Parish Council to rotate chairmanship every year. And following along with the customs and not to break good tradition, it's time to share the love for the chairmanship for the Livingston Parish Council. So to start off 2017, we started off 16. The council chose me to be chairman, and I'm honored. And we also chose Mr. Tracy Girlinghouse to be co-chair to follow in the footsteps. So if everyone still has that same thought in mind, a motion to appoint Mr. Tracy Girlinghouse chairman of the Livingston Parish Council for 2017. Motion made by Mr. Jeff Ard. Is there a second from this board? Mr. Jeff Averitt seconds that motion. Is there any discussion? None being, Miss Sandy, would you call the vote?
Mr. Ard.
Yes.
Mr. Wascom.
Yes.
Mr. Garlinghouse.
Yes.
Mr. King. I'm sorry. Mr. King.
That's good.
Yes.
I accept.
Mr. King.
Yes.
Mr. Harris.
Yes.
Mr. Talbert.
Yes.
Mr. Lobel.
Yes.
Mr. Averitt.
Yes.
Mr. Mack.
Yes.
All right, that motion carries. So, Mr. Tracy Girlinghouse, I'd like to give you this gavel, and we're going to take just a moment and do a little photo op here,
Pass you another gavel.
and pass this over to you.
Yeah.
What's this over here? Thank you so much, Tracy.
Thank you.
You'll do us a good job, my friend. Yeah, let's swap these name tags.
All right. You can't have my paperwork while my special notes.
Got all his notes made.
Yeah.
I like that. That phone right there when you get a chance.
Thank you. Well, first I'd like to say it's an honor. You know, this is, each one of these guys represent their district very, very well, and I really want the public to know that these guys do an excellent job. I'll easy to work with and, make their cases. I've seen them make their cases for their districts, one-on-one in the group. And these are all good guys, and they do the parish proud. They really do.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. So I think the first order of business is to elect a co-chairman. Do I have a motion for a co-chair?
I'll make a motion that we appoint Mr. Jeff Ard as co-chairman.
Motion by Mr. Wascom for Jeff Ard. You have a second?
I'll second that.
Second by Mr. Shane Mack. Would you call for the vote, please?
Discussion.
Any discussion? I'm sorry.
It's all right.
First time? Any discussion from the crowd? Any discussion from the council? Call for a vote, please.
Mr. Wascom?
Yes.
Mr. Garlinghouse?
Yes.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Talbert?
Yes.
Mr. Lobel?
Yes.
Mr. Averett?
Yes.
Mr. Mack?
Yes.
Motion carries. Congratulations.
All right, Jeff, way to go, buddy.
John, you
sit right here?
gotta move again.
They gonna get you plumb out the picture,
That's right. Thank you, Sam.
Now we have to figure out a way to do this about 5 more times and we'll be in good shape.
You're my man.
I don't know about this.
We'll let Bubba get up here in a minute.
Yeah. All right.
Mr. Yeah.
We got it. All right, item 6 is, all right, just please make sure everybody has their cell phone on silent, which is myself. Because I'm good for that. All right. And in walks the former mayor of Walker, Mr. Travis Clark. Thank you for coming in. All right, so item 7 is a public input. Anytime anyone has a comment or anything that we're addressing, you feel free to raise your hand, say your name. We'll acknowledge you, and you can say what you have to say. Okay? So we're going to go to item 9 and item 10, which is the adoption of the minutes for the December 15th, 2016 regular meeting and the December 27th, 2016 board of review. They said we could do these together. So,
I'll make a motion to accept them.
okay, we have a second? Motion by Mr. Jafar, second by Mr. Tableau Bell. Any discussion from the crowd? Any discussion from the council? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. Item 11 is the parish president's report. President Ricks.
Good evening, guys.
Good evening.
A is authorization to execute and file an application for council on aging. This is a pass-through grant. This is not a budget issue for us, but it's a state DOT grant that annually passes through, and I need y'all's authorization to sign on behalf of them.
All right, a motion by.
I'll second.
Motion made by Mr.
Averett.
Jeff Avery. Sorry, Jeff. Second by Mr. Shane Mack. Any discussion from the crowd? Any discussion from the council? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Item B.
Thank you. Ms. Sandy, you gonna have this? And Ms. Melania with council on aging is here, so I'm gonna hand her these papers.
Okay.
Okay.
I don't think you need these. I think it goes straight to her, okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Mr. Sam.
Sam.
Welcome back. This is our annual bid that we do each year for our different materials that's handled by Public Works. I would ask you guys at this time, if you would, to accept the low bid that's been presented to you from our financial director. And you should have a list of all that in your packet.
Sam, I got a question. On the culverts,
Terribly burdened if you wouldn't.
on the culverts,
Yes, sir.
I noticed on one particular culvert, well, on like the round culverts, coastal culvert was the cheapest on every one.
Right.
So we awarded all of them to coastal culvert.
Yes, sir.
On the arch culvert, Simsco, is that how you pronounce that?
I guess.
Was the lowest on 4, And on the 12-inch, or, no, not 12-inch, 78-inch diameter, Coastal was the cheapest. Does that mean we don't take the cumulative bid and give Simcoe all of them, we base them on individual culverts, whoever the cheapest, or?
No, sir, we take it just like it's presented to us.
So, well, it just looks like the highlight is that we're approving Coastal Culvert on the small. Are we giving Coastal Culvert all the arch bids, or
Yes.
just, okay.
Yes, yes.
I mean, so it's based on the cumulative total
That's
of
right.
everything, okay.
That's correct, yes, yes.
I'll make, okay. We're gonna go through these individually, we just want one motion to
No,
approve
sir,
them all?
I just
We're gonna
asked
approve
you
them
to.
I'll make a motion
Make
to
a motion
approve.
as they presented to you.
I'll second that.
All right, motion by Mr. Talbot, second by Mr. King. Any discussion from the audience? Any further discussion from the council? Okay, we're going to put on all these cumulatives, so I'm just gonna read them out. Item 1 was bridge materials, 2 was culverts, 3 was hydraulic fluids, 4 was natural sand, 5 was washed gravel, 6 was limestone grade 8, 7 is limestone grade 610, and 8 was pressure supplies for the LPDC. So, did you call the roll, please?
Mr. Ard?
Yes.
Mr. Wascom?
Yes.
Mr. Garlinghouse?
Yes.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Talbot?
Yes.
Mr. Lobel?
Yes.
Mr. Mack?
Yes.
Mr. Avery?
Yes.
Thank you. Do you have something else?
Yeah, one more issue, just a reminder, we have not forgotten about the, and I've spoken to Ms. Sandy about this, the no smoking and trying to figure out how to work that out. I did authorize them, Monday or Tuesday, I believe, to go ahead and spend a little bit of money to try to design a little bit of a gazebo, which our guys will handle, and then they're gonna decide with Sandy where to place it. We'll give it 3 to 6 months to see if that's working and helping. If it is, fine. If it's not, I'll come back and revisit with you guys on what maybe y'all want to do.
That gives people a chance, that's right, okay.
All right, item 12 is the Office of Homeland Security and Emergency Preparedness. I don't think they had anything to report this meeting, so I'm sure Mr. Mark Harrell is somewhere giving someone else grief.
But we all miss our little buddy.
Yeah, we do, I like
He's probably giving me grief right now.
He's talking about you, I guarantee it.
He's planning on giving you grief.
Item 13 is Planning Commission recommendations. Mr. Sam.
Okay, first on your agenda is a waiver for lots on servitude. This is in Mr. Shane Mack's area, and Mr. Shane, you might be able to help me with this last name. Cody V is what I.
It's Vandermeulen.
Okay, we'll take that. It's a recommendation of the Livingston Parish Planning Commission to approve the waiver for number of lots on a servitude for Mr. Cody. And these are all big lots that's recent.
It's big lots and it's big, nice houses. It's a really, really nice little subdivision. It's gonna be really nice.
How many are there wavering?
I think it's gonna be,
Two.
Two?
It's supposed to be 4, they've got 6.
yeah.
I got you. Okay. I need a motion to,
I'll make the motion.
Second.
motion by Mr. Mack, second by, you just get to second something, Mr. John Wascom. Congratulations.
Right in there.
Any discussion for the audience?
Are fighting for that.
Any discussion for the council? Read the call.
Mr. Ard?
Yes.
Mr. Wascom?
Yes.
Mr. Garlinghouse?
Yes.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Talbot?
Yes.
Mr. Lobel?
Yes.
Mr. Avery?
Yes.
Mr. Mack?
Yes.
Next on your agenda is Arbor Walk 6 filing. This is in Mr. Jeff Avery's district. It's a recommendation of the Livingston Parish Planning Commission to approve the preliminary plat for Arbor Walk 6 filing.
I'll make a motion.
Okay, we got a motion. Mr. Avery, second by Mr. Ard. Any discussion from the audience? Any from the council? All right, call the vote.
Mr. Ard?
Yes.
Mr. Wascom?
Yes.
Mr. Garlinghouse?
Yes.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Talbot?
Yes.
Mr. Lobel?
Yes.
Mr. Avery?
Yes.
Mr. Mack?
Yes.
Next on your agenda is Livingston Parish Planning Commission is a servitude waiver. This is for Mr. Terry Bowman. This is also in Mr. Jeff Avers' district. It's required to have a 40-foot servitude. Mr. Bowman's got a trailer in place there now, and it's a recommendation of Livingston Parish Planning Commission to approve the waiver of the servitude size for Mr. Terry Bozeman. And is it Bozeman? Yeah, Bowman. And he wants 20 feet. Actually, he came to the Planning Commission and he said it was actually about 30 feet. So we said that's fine, Planning Commission approved it. Utilities, if they've got a problem with it, then they'll deal with Mr. Bowman. And I think he's here, if you have any questions.
And then y'all recommend it, right, Sam?
And the commission,
Planning Commission.
they recommended it, so.
I'll make a motion.
Huh? It's
It's
20.
actually
20 is what
What he wants.
needs. 20.
All right, I need a motion. Motion by Mr. Averett. I need a second. Second. Second by Mr. Ard. Call the vote.
Mr. Ard?
Yes.
Mr. Wascom?
Yes.
Mr. Garlinghouse?
Yes.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Talbot?
Yes.
Mr. Lobel?
Yes.
Mr. Mack?
Yes.
Mr. Averett?
Yes.
Magnolia Ridge has been pulled, so it's deferred to another meeting.
All right.
That's all you got?
Yeah, nope. So item 14 was the planning department.
That's you too.
Mr. Sam?
Yes, Southern Lights.
Yeah, authorization for Southern Lights Fiber LLC and the placement of the fiber optic cable within the public right of way
Yes, sir.
on Dunn Road.
Right. That's to give him permission to put his fiber in our right of way. It was reviewed, I think, by Fort and Blotto, that part of it, because I asked, it was so much had to do with it on Dunn Road, so I think Chad then reviewed this thing for me and had a few questions, and he answered all of them. It's his nickel if it ever has to be moved. So it's a recommendation of the Planning Commission to give him.
Is there a big servitude, Chad? Is that, I know we ran into problems with sewer two on 4 Road, with the fiber optics going around trees and having problems generating enough room to dig 3 foot outside the marking or whatever the deal is you gotta do.
Yeah, typically they just put them on the very edge of the right of way, so they sneak them in as close as they can, they go over when they have to, so, but they understand, I think we even put a disclaimer on their plans that if they have to move them, it's at their.
Okay, so.
Is that on the east side of Dunn or west?
I don't remember exactly, it's been a little while since I looked at them, but,
I saw some
It's
markers.
on the east side.
It was on the east side,
It's
yeah.
on the east side.
I was just making sure, some of that's real.
And Gary, you asked a question last meeting, I think, about, whether or not it's for, they've got to be responsible for the movement. It is in law.
Okay.
We have an ordinance in place.
I just know that when sewer two was trying to lay that force main down 4,
Right.
there were issues because of trees and the way the fiber optics went, and they ended up looking at some alternate routes.
Right.
Which,
Well,
I don't know whether it costs more or costs less. I've noticed, I was aware of that problem, and so I just wanted to make
right.
sure.
And I understand that and I appreciate it, because that's a big expense on us.
And I think we've
They're
already put
supposed
the
to be,
sewage
they're
in there.
required to move it if it needs to be moved.
It's done.
Yeah, it's all done.
I just knew it was a problem in the
Yeah.
past. I wanted to be sure we should let these guys do this.
Absolutely.
That if
It's on
it
their name.
becomes a problem for us in the future, that they gotta move their line.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I'll make a motion for that.
All right. Motion by Mr. King, who was the second?
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Talbot. Any discussion from the audience? Any discussion from the council?
I have some real
Okay.
quick, Sam, and I know that fiber optics is very expensive if it's damaged. Do we have other utilities in that same servitude as well, Chad, would y'all know, or, so? I guess my question is if by chance it gets damaged in there, I
I'm
mean,
sure the,
are we free from having to
no,
pay
we're
the
not
cost?
free,
I
no.
mean,
Because this stuff has been in there, some of the water lines, some of your gas lines, it's been in there.
I'm saying, are we liable?
25
Liability.
plus.
He said liability.
Are we liable?
Are we
Is my
okay?
question.
If we go to work on our
We're not
stuff.
liable.
So even if it gets damaged in the servitude,
Mr. Moody should,
No, it's not, we're not liable. In fact, we make them sign a contract to provide insurance so that we're covered in case.
okay,
anything
that's
happens.
all, that's all I was asking.
But Chad, isn't the understanding that like, if they mark a water line, then you've got a buffer of so many feet on each side, and fiber optics, the buffer's bigger, right? Isn't it understood that
Yeah, I don't know the exact, I don't know if they got an exact buffer for it, but they should be putting it underneath our water lines and our force mains and other utilities that we already have out there. So I mean, that's just common sense. If
Okay.
you have to dig it up for some reason, you're not gonna sit there and tear it up. So I think that's one of the reasons they stay on the very edge of the right of way, because most of ours is offset like 5 feet in. And that way it kind of saves out all the utilities.
Okay.
All right, so we had a,
One more
we had a motion, okay. Please call.
Motion by Mr. King and a second by Mr. Hill.
Okay, motion by Mr. King, second by Mr. Talbot. Any discussion from the audience? Any discussion from the council? Further discussion? All right, please call the vote, please.
Mr. Ard?
Yes.
Mr. Wascom?
Yes.
Mr. Girlinghouse?
Yes.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Talbot?
Yes.
Mr. Lobel?
Yes.
Mr. Averett?
Yes.
Mr. Mack?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Singh.
Thank you.
All right, so we're now entering the public hearing. The public hearing is now open. So anyone from the audience who wants to discuss any of the items that are brought forward, then feel free to raise your hand. You'll be acknowledged and you can come forward and tell us how you feel. So, item 15 is a public hearing and adoption of the LP ordinance number 1649, declare certain movable property and equipment no longer needed for public purposes, provided for its sale by internet sales with, and or public auction. So, any discussion? Yep. Go ahead.
No, I don't have a discussion.
Any discussion for the audience? And I'm sorry I did that wrong. I know you have to read it by title, so any discussion from the council? You please read it by title. Thank you.
Yes, this is proposed ordinance 16-49, an ordinance to declare certain movable property, equipment no longer needed for public purposes, provide for its sale by internet sales and or public auction, and provide for terms of sale.
Okay, I need a motion to.
Close the public hearing first. We don't?
We're not.
Oh, okay.
So I need a motion.
I'll make that
By Mr.
motion.
Mack, second. Second by Mr. Ard. Any discussion from the audience? Any discussion from council? All right, call the vote, please.
Mr. Ard?
Yes.
Mr. Wascom?
Yes.
Mr. Girlinghouse?
Yes.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Talbot?
Yes.
Mr. Lobel?
Yes.
Mr. Averett?
Yes.
Mr. Mack?
Yes.
Okay. Item 16, we're still in the public hearing. It's a, I believe you want to read it by title beforehand. Go ahead.
This is proposed ordinance number 16-50, an ordinance authorizing the hiring of one full-time employee for the parish council office and setting salary range for same.
Any discussion from the audience? Any discussion from the council? Please call the vote, please. Do you want it?
Motion.
Oh,
Motion.
Jeff, make a motion, Jeff, make it, need a second? Second by Mr. Tad Lobel, motion made by Mr. Jeff Ard. Okay, call the roll.
Mr. Ard?
Yes.
Mr. Wascom?
Yes.
Mr. Girlinghouse?
Yes.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Talbot?
Yes.
Mr. Lobel?
Yes.
Mr. Averett?
Yes.
Mr. Mack?
Yes.
Okay, the public hearing is now closed. So, item 17 is an introduction of an ordinance to add a three-way stop sign at the corner of Rayville Drive and Covington Drive. Mr. Talbot?
Yeah, I got an email from the homeowner association asking to make Covington and Rayville a three-way stop. And this was the first available meeting since I got the email to put it on the agenda. The only comment I'm gonna make about that is, I mean, the people that live in that subdivision, know what they think they need to either slow people down or, control traffic. The only thing I'm gonna make note of is that in my subdivision, at the request of the people that live in there, we put a three-way stop at the corner of Beverly and Don. And I'm not sure we hadn't created a bigger hazard, because there are some young people in there that refuse to stop at it. And before, when there wasn't a stop sign, then the people coming off of Dama always stopped.
Yeah.
And now that we've made it a three-way stop to slow the same young people down that are running that stop sign, we've almost created another hazard. So I'm hoping the homeowners association knows what, the people in the subdivision want as we do this, and, but people need to understand that running three-way stop signs is dangerous. And so, you know, I talked to the sheriff about the particular situation in my subdivision this week. And, you know, he's promised to put some motorcycle officers in there to try to do it. But the thought was, it was such a long straightaway that, you know, they had a 30 mile an hour, 35 mile an hour speed limit in there, and people were driving 45 and 50, that the stop sign would at least slow them down, and now they're just blowing through it without regard to the fact that somebody else has stopped and might be moving forward. And I'm not sure we hadn't created a worse situation, but it was the you know, it was the wishes of the people in the subdivision, and this is the wish of the people in Quail Creek. So
Has there actually been any accidents or just near
there
misses?
hadn't been any accidents. There just been, you know,
Near miss.
young people just, you know, just don't seem to have a quite grasp of certain things. And, you
do that in
know,
a
hopefully
video.
we write 3 or 4 tickets in there, we'll get somebody's attention. But, you know, that's what needs to happen.
But this is just the introduction, correct? So-
Right, it's just the introduction, but I just wanted to make note that, you know, we're doing what they asked, but if the people that live there don't take heed of what's going on, you create a worse situation.
Okay. You need to read this by title? Please.
This is proposed ordinance number 17-01, an ordinance to amend and reenact section 10-9A, stop signs, three-way stop of the Code of Ordinances in and for the parish of Livingston to add an intersection at Rayville Drive and Covington Drive. Public hearing to be held January 26, 2017 at 6 p.m.
Thank you. All right, that's, I guess, call a vote on that? Or just an introduction? I can make a motion.
I'll make the motion for the
Mr.
introduction.
Tyler, I need a second. Second, Mr. Averett, thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, motion passes. Item 18 is the board appointments for, I guess, the Gas and Utility District Number 1, reappointments, I think, Mr. Shane Mack.
Yeah, those are 5-year appointments, and Mr. Johnny A. Johnson, who is actually the president this time, his term expired, and he's done a good job, and there's been no issues. All the board members are in favor of reappointing him, so I'm in favor of it. So I want to make a motion that we reappoint Mr. Johnny A. Johnson to Gas Utility District 1.
Okay, I have a motion by Mr. Mack. I need a second. Second by Mr. Lobell. Any discussion from the audience? Any from the council? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Thanks.
All right. Okay, item 19 is the discussion and introduction of an ordinance or resolution for possible name change and appointment of board members for Sewer District Number 2. Mr. Gary Talbert.
Y'all all know that we earlier this year put forth an item on the ballot to merge Sewer 1 and 2. We did some preliminary work on that, and that took effect January 1. So we've got some issues. We had originally planned on putting 7 board members on it, but we realized by state law it can only have 5. So I've since talked to Senator Erdy about, you know, doing a local bill, you know, pre-advertising, pre-filing a local bill to address that from 5 to 7. Now, y'all all might have received an email. Sandy, did you forward that email out between your email to Chris and then Chris's response, Mr. Booth's response to you, and then this is what Ms. Laverne's comments, who actually did the work. She was bond counsel that did the work on putting forth the item on the, getting it before the bond commission and getting it on the ballot. Chris, you read her stuff. What do you think we need to do? What are our next steps that we need to take forth?
Well, the action to merge the 2 districts has been accomplished by the vote of the people. I think all you need to do now is amend your current ordinances to clean up the language referring to it as District 1 and District 2, and I think we can do that by simply amending those ordinances. Now, whether we do it, introduce it tonight, I can probably give you the language on the fly, or we can have.
Well, I mean, I think our intent was to discuss and kind of get an outline of what we need to do for the future.
Yeah, that's
We
all.
currently have a board in place. The 4 members of Sewer 2 are now the acting board for the whole deal. And
Yeah.
Mr. Ards had an appointment. I mean, initially, when I was elected to the council, there were 5 members on that, and all 5 of them resided in District 2. There were 2 resignations. I asked Mr. Ard and Mr. King to put forth somebody in their deal. I think Mr. King did that. I think Mr. Ard has somebody he wants to put forward. We could let those 5 be the acting, I mean.
You could appoint that, you could appoint them tonight, I
He could, I mean, we've got the 4 appointed. If Mr. Ard wanted to appoint one tonight, we could get a full 5, and then we could, as we get the ordinance going, and whether we're gonna change the name to the Livingston Parish Consolidated Sewer District, or whatever we wanna do as a group, you know, we can, I
Well, you
guess.
need to let us know that tonight, so we can plug that into the.
Does anybody have a problem calling it the Livingston Parish Consolidated Sewer District? And then that kind of puts forth, that'll be the district for the whole parish in the future. Does anybody got issues?
Does it need to have consolidated?
No, it could be the Livingston
I think
Parish
it just
Sewer
needs to be
District.
the Livingston Parish Sewer District.
I mean, we could
And as
just
we
name it.
expand boundaries over time,
You
that's
said there's
it.
5 members?
There's 5 members,
There's only
and
4
currently there's 4 appointed right now.
Okay.
And so I think what we need to do is there, I'm gonna be honest, with 3 of them reside in my district. And the reason I didn't reappoint 2 in the past, when the other 2 resigned, is I knew what we were moving forward. There was no need for me to have to get rid of 4 board members to keep 1. You know what I'm saying? So I guess what we need to do is we can appoint, if Mr. Ard appoints one tonight, that gets us to 5. We know that eventually we're gonna have 7 board members. We need to, we probably need to address who else wants to appoint a board member, or if they wanna leave the board in place until we get to 7, that's entirely up to the council. I think basically what it amounts to is that particular district boundary as it exists right now touches all the council districts except Mr. Lobel's and Mr. Mack's. Is that the way, I mean, that's kind of what I saw in looking at the boundary map.
It's very, very little in my district. Just
Right, I mean, but I understand, but I mean, what we were looking at was giving every person that was affected by the current boundary an appointment. So basically, you know, I have 3 gentlemen that live in my district, and obviously, you know, there are 5, 7 councilmen that 2 of them are gonna wanna replace some of my people. I mean, some of those appointments, and I have no issue with that. I just think that, you know, we as a council need to discuss what we're gonna do, get Mr. Moody to move forward on drawing that, drafting the ordinance to clean up the language, and then, you know, people need to be thinking about what replacements, you know, if we want an appointment out of Mr. Harris's district, or Mr. Lobel's, Mr. Girlinghouse district, or Mr. Wascom's district to replace, y'all need to be thinking about, discuss amongst yourselves what you wanna do.
I have a question. We have, it covers 5. Will those current board members, are their terms expired? Are they staggered?
This is a no-term limit appointment, meaning that they serve at the pleasure of the council. So it's just, you know, it's kinda like if you decide you wanna make an appointment, then, and you wanna replace one of the existing board members.
Since you have 3, you don't mind giving up 2?
No, absolutely not. I mean, the whole
Okay.
point of this thing was
So we
to
could
kind of create a situation
Okay.
where everybody had a voice in this thing,
Okay.
instead of one councilman trying to appoint, you know, everything. That's why when I had 2 resignations right after I was elected, I approached Mr. Ard and Mr. King about making appointments to that board, because if I knew that if this thing moved forward as we talked about, there was no need for me to appoint 2 more people and then have to replace 4 individuals.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Make a motion.
Well, I
Mr.
mean,
Ard?
I think we need Mr. Moody to clear the language up on this.
Well, that can be done by the next meeting, no problem. You could appoint the 4th member tonight, if you have.
I mean, we've got an opening. I mean, we could appoint a 5th member tonight with Mr. Ard, right?
Okay.
Is Mr. Ard ready to appoint him?
Yep.
Let's make a
Let's do
motion.
that.
Would you like to appoint?
I'd like to make a motion to appoint Mr. Tony Acord.
Okay, my motion to appoint, made by Mr. Jeff Ard. I need a second.
I'll second that.
Second by Mr. Shirley Keene. Any discussion from the audience? Any discussion, further discussion from the council? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, motion carries.
Okay, is everybody satisfied with the name, the Livingston Parish Sewer District? So that's, I think that's how we need to draft it, and then we'll make sure that we continue with with Senator Erdy to make sure that we get the legislation introduced. Because there's not a limit on local bills. I mean, there's a limit on 5 bills on a
Right.
fiscal deal, but a local bill's unlimited if
true.
you pre-file and advertise, and he can introduce any of those he wants.
Right.
And I think it's important that we have an appointment from each person
You know,
that
I
touches
just-
that district right
And I
now.
just think so.
I like that idea too.
And as we
You
expand,
never know, you think about the future, you know.
Oh, yeah, as we
It
expand
doesn't affect
out,
me right now, but one day, you know, it might.
I mean, as
affect
we
me.
expand out,
We'll get to these,
You come.
But I mean, that was the thought from the beginning, was to create a board that represented the constituents, you know, the people that were being serviced, you know, in a fair and equitable manner. And that was the intent from the beginning. We just have a little house cleaning
so
we
y'all
gotta do
can
to
get
get
some
it all
calls on
straight.
sewage now.
And then I just think ultimately the three of y'all, Mr. Harris, Mr. Wascom, Mr. Girlinghouse, need to get together and figure out what couple appointments y'all wanna make right now, knowing that the one that doesn't make an appointment now has got one coming. Got one coming after the legislation's done. And then, you know, I'll make a suggestion as to which guys I would like to see y'all replace, you know, of the 3 that exist in my district. And then, you know, eventually we'll work toward a 5-member board that represents 5 council districts. After the legislation, we'll have a 7-member board elected, you know, representing 7 council districts. And as we expand into, you know, Mr. Lobell's district and Mr. Mack's district, we'll get that amended to
9 members.
9 members.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Anything else we gotta? do on
Yes,
that?
at this time, I'd like to ask the council members if we can lift the agenda. So,
Did you want to vote to name, go ahead and name
I don't
by
think we-
resolution?
didn't we vote?
I think we just agreed. I think Mr. Booty's just gonna draw it up to say that
You did
name.
resolution?
I think we did
Well,
vote.
the point, we need to put on the appointment of the 4th member if you wanted to do that tonight.
I think
I think
we
he
already
did.
did that.
Yeah, you did that.
We voted on that.
That's
So,
what we
I mean, the
voted.
thing is,
Fifth
the 5th member.
Okay, so we can do that, though. She wants to vote to name it, so.
It doesn't matter.
All right.
We can make a
Well, I'm just
resolution.
gonna put that in. I
All right,
mean,
that's cool.
Just put it in and we don't need to have another resolution just to name it. He can put it, okay.
All right, so, we need to ask to lift the agenda so we could add Mr. Wasson.
Yeah, I've asked, the chairman, I'd like to, I spoke with, Billy Taylor this week, and he said that they're going to be evaluating streets for overlay coming up within the next month or so. Still waiting on the final budgets to know what the tax revenues are gonna be, so we'll know exactly how much money it's gonna be. But if there's any streets in your district that you wanna put on the list to be, evaluated, to be overlaid, we need to try to get them in within a month. So if it pleases the council, I'd like to make a motion to lift the agenda and add a street in District 4 to that priority list, road list, and that street being Desert Willow. I've spoken with the city council in Denham Springs, and one of the council members requested me put that on the agenda to add to the road priority list, Desert Willow in Denham Springs.
Okay, I have a motion by Mr. Wascom to lift the agenda. Do I have a second? Second. All right. Second by Mr. Averett. Could you call the roll, please?
Mr. Ard?
Yes.
Mr. Wascom?
Yes.
Mr. Girlinghouse?
Yes.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Talbert?
Yes.
Mr. Lobell?
Yes.
Mr. Averett?
Yes.
Mr. Mack?
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you need another
Agenda has
motion to
been
add
lifted,
it
so
to
we
the?
need another motion to add Desert
Desert
Willow.
Willow to the priority road list.
Motion by
To be evaluated.
Mr. Wascom. Have a second? Second by Mr. R.C. Bubba Harris.
Thank you, Bob.
Any discussion from the council, from the audience? Any from the council? All right, call the vote.
Mr. Ard?
Yes.
Mr. Wascom?
Yes.
Mr. Girlinghouse?
Yes.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Talbert?
Yes.
Mr. Lobell?
Yes.
Mr. Averett?
Yes.
Mr. Mack?
Yes.
All right, at this time, we need a motion to go back into the regular meeting. Motion by Mr. Ard. Second by Mr. King. All in favor, say.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, back into the regular meeting we are. At this time,
You gonna do the drainage thing next time?
so, well, we could, the district attorney report, did you have anything to report?
we're taking up the addendum tonight?
Yes.
So we're gonna go in executive session?
Well,
Yes.
we've talked about that. I think we can cover that without going to
Okay.
executive session if you want to do it in open session.
Okay.
I'm good.
All right. So, this is the discussion on the, instituting litigation to seek, is that the right one? To seek declaratory judgment regarding public road status of Legion Road. And I believe that is in Mr. Avery's district.
What we have here is a problem with a blacktop road. That, they're saying it's private. Went to the higher court, they said it's not. Now it's back to being a private road. This needs to come to a stop. We gotta do something, we gotta move forward with this. It's, blacktop road is actually cutting the house off in the back that they can't even get to their home through this road, because they're putting a fence or a gate up across the road. And, it's just something we gotta stop.
Is it a dead end road?
At the house in the back, it's a dead end road.
So has the parish maintained the road over time?
Let me get Mr. Sam to come up, he can give you some information about this situation too.
Well, according to our records, public works records, we've probably been maintaining this road for about 9 years. 1997, the mayor requested a capital outlay program. Some reason or another it didn't get done. In 2001, I think they re-requested to put on a capital outlay program, and it was done. So we've been probably maintaining this thing and working on it for, like I say, according to our records, around 9 years.
Does it run like through somebody's private property and then into
No,
another
this
piece,
is
and that's
just a
why they're trying to
blacktop
block it
road
off?
that goes so far back into the,
Well, I think what it is, it does run through their private property, on property on both sides of the road. I have a friend that actually owns land in the front on both sides of the road. I guess if he wanted to, he just put him a gate up across the front.
well, it's
We're
just
gonna
like
start
any
doing
other
that,
parish
you know, it's-
road. You know,
If it's a
one
parish
day,
road, we
long
can't shut
ago,
off
it did go
blacktop
through
road.
private.
Well, what is the parish's take on this? Is it a parish road or not?
It's supposed to be a parish
Well,
road.
as far as we're concerned, it's a parish road.
Yeah, it's
So,
Legion Road.
so Chris, my question is, if this has already been litigated once, and the Supreme Court, the state Supreme Court's already ruled on this, how does a district judge create another ruling that makes it a private road again?
Well, here's my appreciation. I haven't studied all the rulings,
Okay.
but, and I've only basically know what I've been told by the staff and mostly from Mr. Averett. The litigation in place now is between the two landowners that are affected, the guy that put up the gate and the guy that needs access. And this came up before Judge Brenda Ricks, and they were sought a preliminary injunction to one side or other, sought a preliminary injunction, and she either granted it or denied it.
Granted.
And the other side took a writ to the First Circuit. First Circuit said it was inappropriate to grant the preliminary injunction for whatever reason. They sent it back to her for further consideration. So she's now reconsidered it, and she's now ruled and says it's a private road, and so she's not going to stop the blocking of the road. So
Okay.
now, we weren't involved in that litigation. I mean, could we be affected by that ruling? Possibly. No doubt that landowner's going to say, hey, this has already been decided. But it was decided by two people in litigation that we were not involved in it. So I don't think the standard rule about res judicata, meaning you have to live with what's already been decided, only applies when it's the same parties over the same issue.
Okay.
I mean, I think what I'd like you to do tonight is authorize me to investigate the possibilities of it, and if it looks like it's viable, to go ahead and file the suit. Now, as my understanding is that this is not, was not made a public road under the standard way that we do it these days. In other words, the property wasn't dedicated on a plat, wasn't accepted, it didn't meet the standard. It was apparently just taken in as an accommodation to the, is it the city or the property owners of the community? Because it did service more than one home.
Where's it at exactly?
So
It's on Legion Road, right before you get to Bayview on Highway 16.
Okay.
It's off to the right there, coming from Free Settlement. It'll be on the right.
So Chris, my question is, if there's already been a ruling where the parish was either the defendant or the plaintiff,
We weren't in it.
we've never been there.
It's been the two parties.
Okay, so if the two parties are fighting and we think it's our road, what stops us from taking the fence down on what we believe to be our road?
Well, that's something we could do, but in the face of a district court judgment saying it's private property, I think we'd probably be bad faith. That's why I think it's a safer maneuver.
I just asked,
Yeah.
I'm just curious. So you think that we need to give you ask you to investigate it and
Yes.
come back and report us on what?
I really need it, because I've heard mostly from this side of the case. I want to find out what the other landowner lawyer says and see what evidence they had, because it must be some other side of the story, I'm
I
guessing.
have a question. If it was private property, then a survey would tell you, am I correct? And then if it was never donated to the parish, then a survey would have that right away, then would it not? So, I mean, the recording would be in the clerk of court's office, whether it's a parish property or
Not
not.
necessarily, because if it was
Is
done
that
the
not
right
true?
way, yes.
Okay,
but-
so look, we're just voting to give him the authorization
Let him see what he.
to find out the answer to all these questions.
Sam, we need to make a motion.
Thanks.
I can't make a motion.
I will. I'll make a motion. I'll second. To give
Motion,
Mr.
Mr. Avery to
move
give
forward.
Authority to move forward into this, seconded by
John Watson.
John Wascom.
Thank you, John.
Thank you. Any comments from the audience? Please. Any comments from the council? Okay.
I'm gonna recuse myself of the discussion here and abstain from the vote. My brother represents one of the individuals involved.
Fair enough.
Just trying to do the right thing.
That's fine.
All right, so, all right, call the roll, please.
Mr. Ard?
Yes.
Mr. Wadscomb?
Yes.
Mr. Girlinghouse?
Yes.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Talbot?
Yes.
Mr. Lobel?
Yes.
Mr. Avery?
Yes.
All right, at this time, I guess we need a
I'd like to make a motion to
motion.
adjourn.
Well, we didn't actually do it, so. All right, this is the best time, I guess. I need a motion to adjourn.
I'll offer that.
Mr. Bubba.
Mr. Bubba, a motion,
Bubba's
Mr.
ready to
Bubba.
go.
We'll have a second by who haven't I heard from tonight? I guess I heard from everybody. Mr. Lobel?
I'll do that.
I have a second for Mr. Lobel. Call the roll, please.
Mr. Ard?
Yes.
Mr. Wadscomb?
Yes.
Mr. Girlinghouse?
Yes.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Talbot?
Yes.
Mr. Lobel?
Yes.
Mr. Avery?
Yes.
Mr. Matt?
Yes.
Thank you. Meeting's adjourned.